Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 6 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to learn Fusion 360 or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And today's lesson is probably the most important lesson in this entire series of classes on Fusion 360. Because as I explained last week, the battle for Fusion 360 is won or lost at the 2D sketch level. And as I look at the resources that are out there, the educational videos that are out there, they rarely really explain the 2D sketch level and the mindset that you need to have as you are working in that 2D design space. So that's what we're going to look at today. And specifically, I'm going to show you the area that is very confusing to people and the area that keeps people from either really mastering Fusion 360 or maybe it's the reason that they just throw it out and give up. And so if you will pay attention and you will master what I'm going to show you today, I'll break it down step by step. You're going to have Fusion 360 singing and dancing for you. Sound pretty good? I hope it does. So specifically what we're going to be talking about is constraints. And I kind of got a little bit into constraints last week as we were learning how to be deliberate about dimension and be deliberate about position and how to fully constrain our designs in the 2D level before we finish the sketched out. So sort of fully constraining our designs is what we talked about last week. And as we were learning to fully constrain our designs, we got into a little bit the topic of constraints, but that's really what we're going to go into great detail today. But before we do that, I have to remind you guys that very soon we are going to be teaching you how to really design like mechanical engineers. And part of that is you guys need to understand how to use electronic calipers. And in order to learn that, you need to have a set of calipers. These are the ones that I'm using. It's a really nice pair for $22. It's a great value. They're great calipers. If you don't have a set of calipers already, there is a link down in the description below. You can hop over and buy from Amazon the exact same set that I'm going to be teaching you how to use. And then we're going to be using these calipers in just about all the classes in all the videos in the remainder of this class, if that makes sense. Okay, that is enough of all this introductory banter, and let's jump in and let's look at what we are going to do today. Again, the topic today is understanding constraints in the 2D sketch level on Fusion 360. Okay, understanding constraints. Now, what I'm going to tell you right off the bat is constraints will either be your worst nightmare or they will be your best friend. Okay, if you don't understand them and you don't really grasp what they're doing, Fusion 360 is going to be a nightmare for you. But if you understand it, then constraints are going to be your very best friend. The kind of two other things that we're going to be looking at. So number one, constraints will be your worst nightmare or they'll be your best friend. The second thing is I'm going to show you today, never use a dimension when you could instead use a constraint. Anytime you can use a constraint instead of a dimension, use a constraint instead of a dimension. And the third thing I'm going to show you is constraints are not about adding things in that allow you to lock or fully define or fully constrain your 2D sketch. You don't just go in and add constraints so that you get the little lock icon and can safely leave your 2D sketch, your 2D part of the program. What you have to understand is these constraints are about defining right relationships between related elements of your design. And so you want to rightly define the relationship between parts of your design that are related. And how do you do that? You do that with constraints, not with dimensions. Okay, so this is what we're doing today. We are going to learn how to use the constraints. I'm just going to go through all the different constraints and sort of show you what they do and how to use them. Then I'm going to go through some examples where you really start developing a mindset of viewing these constraints as a help to you, as a tool that allows you to develop designs that are easy to edit and behave in exactly the way that you want. Okay, I have talked way too much, and so I need you guys to go ahead and fire up Fusion 360. Then what we're going to do is we are going to come up to the little create bar up here. You're going to left mouse click, you're going to come down, you're going to say create sketch. We design in the red green plane, which is the XY plane. Z is for extruding up. We're going to design in the XY plane, the red green plane. And let me just start by giving you an example of why the constraints in Fusion 360, if you don't understand them, can be your worst nightmare. So let's just start with something simple. Let's come in and let's click on the circle and come down and click on the origin, click, release, and then drag. All right, now we want to put our dimension in. So I'm going to type in that little box there, 50, that little dimension box 50. So boom, we have a circle with a diameter of 50. It is black, which means it's fully constrained. And then if we look over here, it has the little lock icon on the sketch, which means Fusion 360 is happy. It's telling you, buddy, I know exactly what you want and I know exactly where you want it. All right, that's very good. That's what we look for. But let's say that we come back later and we want to edit this sketch. And let's say instead of one circle, I want two circles and I want them to the right and the left of the origin. And so I use sort of my intuition from my Microsoft products, and maybe what I do is I click on this and oh, it looks like it selected it, and then I grab it and I try to move it. I click on it, I grab it, and I try to move it, and I can't move it. Well, maybe I should click on the center point. So I click on the center point, I drag, it won't move. Maybe I need to grab the edge. I point at the edge, I click on the edge, I grab it, but it won't move. Maybe I need to select it by boxing it. That's it. I'll select it by boxing it and come here and move it, and the darn thing just won't move. So I go in and I search on Google and I say, how do you move a sketch in Fusion 360? And I find maybe it's not as intuitive as I thought. I need to select it. So I'm going to come here, I select it. Let's say I right mouse click and then I come over. So I select, I right mouse click, I come over and I select move and copy. And look at this. When I say move and copy, okay, it wants me to select something. So I'm going to say, all right, I'll show you what I want to move. So I will click on select, and then I will click on this. Let's see, click on maybe the outside circle there. All right, boom. Now I have these little move bars where I can drag this. And let's say that I'm going to drag it over 25, and in fact I can put in there 25 I want to drag over, so I put in the 25, and now I want to move it up, so I grab the little up bar, and I could even put in 25 there, so I want to move it over 25 and up 25. Look, I've got the little move thing over there. It should be now, I should just come over here and say okay, and that circle should pop up there, right? Denied. And I'll tell you, this is why 90% of the people that try Fusion 360 quit in the first session, and that is they sit here and they spend 4 hours trying to move an object. They do everything they can possibly think of. and they can't move the object, okay? And they give up because they think, how am I going to design the International Space Station if I can't even move a circle? Okay, what is the problem? The problem is constraints. And Fusion 360, without telling you, has put a constraint in there, and you don't know that it's there. And when you try to move something, it doesn't give you an error message like a little pop-up. Oh, you can't move that because we decided to constrain it. And this is the thing that you have to understand that is maddening, maddening about Fusion 360. Fusion 360 respects constraints above what the designer or the user asks for. So the user or designer, me, asked to move the device, but Fusion 360 ignored that and respected the hidden constraint. Now, this is something that is kind of simple once you understand it, but when you draw something around the origin, Fusion 360 puts a design constraint that locks that center point of the circle at the origin. And what you can do is you can come in and you can kind of hover over the origin, and then you see that little L-shaped thing that kind of looks like Tinker Toys that are plugged together. That is saying that the center of the circle is constrained to the origin. All right, so if we want to move this, what do we need to do? We need to get it to appear, which is not always easy. I point at the origin, it appears. Now I carefully point at the constraint, and then I click on the constraint, and now you see that it's kind of highlighted blue. Now I can come in, after I've selected it, now I can come in and I can right mouse click and I can say delete, and boom, that constraint is gone. Now if I come in and select this, and now if I go right mouse click, move copy, now when I move this, the circle moves, and boom, I have been able to move that circle. Now, what's one thing that happened when I moved the circle? When I moved the circle, my sketch is no longer constrained. Why is my sketch no longer constrained? This circle is just out there floating in space. It's not locked down by a dimension. And so let's see if we can fix that by putting in some construction lines so that we can generate a very deliberate point for this circle to sit at. So I'm going to say I want to draw a line, so I click on line. I come down here on this icon under line type and I say I want it to be a construction line. I'm going to click at the origin. I'm going to come out, and then I am going to dimension this deliberately at 50, and then I am going to click enter, and boom, look at that. I now have this at 50. Now I'm going to come up and get a second construction line. I will start where this one ended. I click, I take my hand off, I move up, and then again, I'm going to type in 50 and then enter. And now I have a very deliberate spot on which this circle can sit. So now what you don't want to do is, like, notice that my sketch is not fully constrained. This is constrained, and this is constrained, and this is dimensioned, but what is missing? I need to get this where I want it, and simply coming in here and placing it here, it's in the right spot, but that doesn't lock the sketch in. What you need to do is be deliberate and say, I want this point constrained to this point. I want those 2 points at the same spot. I want the 2 points coincident. So what do I want to do? I want to add a constraint. I want to add a constraint. And what type of constraint? A coincident restraint. So I come here to restraints and I look at coincident. I click on that. Now I have to tell it the 2 points I want coincident. I want this point at it carefully, and I want it coincident with this point. And wow, that was an unexpected result. And so I am going to undo that. Somehow I didn't get that selected correctly. So we are going to come back to coincident, and I am going to click on the center point here. The center point is clicked, and then I am going to click here, and shazam, look at that. What other magic happened? My sketch is now fully constrained. So Fusion 360 is saying, buddy, I know what you want, and I know where you want it, and everything is good. We could now go to the 3D layer, and we could, what we could do is we could go to the 3D layer, and we could effectively extrude and everything because our 2D sketch is now fully constrained. So that is pretty cool. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and show you the different kind of constraints you can do and how they can constrain things and how they can lock things down. And then after showing you just what the different constraints do, then I'm going to show you how to think about constraints, how to make constraints be the most powerful tool that you have in your Fusion 360 library. But let's just kind of play around with them a little bit so you can begin to get familiar. So I chose my select tool. I'm being mindful of the palette. I tell it, what do I want to do? I want to select something. I'm going to draw a box around that. I'm going to delete it all. Okay. Now, what I want you to see is that, like, if I just come in and I draw a rectangle, I start here, I click on the origin, I come up, and let me escape because I don't want that to be a construction line. You see how this is set as construction line? That means anything I draw is going to be a construction line type. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to get the rectangle tool. I'm going to click on the origin. I am going to come up, and I come up to here, and then I click, and then I'm going to dimension it. I get my dimension tool, and I come here and I say, let's make that 100. Okay, and then still with my dimension tool, I need to make sure that you're seeing this. Get my dimension tool, come over, and then this one I'm going to say is 75. And so now my sketch is locked down. Everything is good. Everything is happy. Now, if I come in and I try to move this, I can't move it. But that doesn't bother me because I know that the reason I can't move it is because this point is constrained to the origin. Now you see I have two coincident constraints. One is constraining the endpoint of this line with the endpoint of this line, so that makes those two lines meet in the corner, and then that intersection is then constrained to the origin, and this thing is fully locked down, fully defined. We understand why we can't move it, and we understand if we needed to move it, we understand how to move it. That would be remove that origin constraint. Okay, now let's look. We have got some constraints here that are already here, and it looks like one of the constraints that we have is this is a vertical constraint. Okay, like do you see this little horizontal vertical? Fusion 360 told this line to be vertical, this line to be vertical, this line to be horizontal, this line to be horizontal, and now there's no way that this thing can move around. But what if I decided I didn't want this to be a rectangle? Well, what I could do is I could take this one, this constraint, and I could delete it. And now if I come over to this point, let's see, maybe I can come over to this point and I can move it up and down to make a different shape. Also notice when I did that, my sketch is no longer fully constrained because this can float around. That was unexpected. This one can, let's see, I'm not sure why it is doing that. So sometimes when you remove the constraints, you get an unexpected result. Maybe I should come down here like this. But why is it that I can move this point around, okay, and I cannot move this point around? This point, I guess, I can move around this way. So you see, this shows some interesting things. Why can I move this one around like this? Well, that's because this 100 dimension is put on this side. And so let's see if I can remove that. Let's see if I can remove that dimension, delete. And now I'm going to come and I'm going to put that 100 down here. Okay, the 100 dimension is going to go down there. Now, this thing can't just move left and right like that. And this one, I can't really move at all. You see, this point, I can't move at all because it's locked at 75 up and it's locked at 100 over. So this point, I just simply can't move. But this point over here, I can move because it is not constrained. This does not have to be horizontal, and this can go anywhere, and then this is not dimensioned, and because this one's not dimensioned, that point can go up and down. So if we wanted to fully constrain it, what's one way we could do it? I could get this and I could say make it horizontal, and now boom, I'm fully constrained. What is another way that I could fully constrain it? I could say I could come and I could get my perpendicular, constraint. Well, let me unconstrain it first. Okay, so now I'm back to the problem. Now I could come and I could get my perpendicular constraint, and I could say make this perpendicular to this. And now I am fully constrained. Let me undo that. And what's another way that I could fully constrain? I could come and I could get my dimension tool, and I could dimension this at 75, okay? And now it is a square again, and it is locked down because I say this has to be 75, this has to be 75. That means this guy cannot wander around. But let's take that out, and let's see how else we could fix it. Okay, how else we could fix it? I could choose this. I could get the constraint of parallel, and I could say make this parallel to this. And why did it not like that? That parallel to that, and shazam, look at that. Fully constrained again. So do you see there's many different ways to fully constrain things, and the better you get at Fusion 360, the more elegant you can constrain things. As I am doing these lessons, I am not trying to show you the most elegant way. I'm showing you a way that you can think about it that will be the easiest thing that will always work, so that you can always get your designs fully constrained. I should say your sketches fully constrained. So let's go ahead and let's select. I was not mindful of the palette, so let's get the select tool, come up here, select all that, and I am going to delete it. So now let's just go through these constraints and see what each one does, and then I will do a couple of design examples that will show you the full power of the constraint methodology. And so I'm just going to start with two random lines, and so I'm going to draw a line here, and then I am going to get a line, and I'm going to draw a line here. Okay, and then I'm hitting escape. So what you can see is if you're doing a line, you kind of get stuck in line mode, and the way you get out of it is you hit escape, and then you don't keep drawing lines. And so that to me is a little bit annoying. Probably there's something you can set in the preferences where it won't do that. But let's see what we're going to do. We're going to set horizontal and vertical constraints. And so let me make this one more like this. And so I am going to get this horizontal vertical, and I'm going to come down here and put a constraint on this line to make it horizontal or vertical. What is it going to make it? Well, it's closer to horizontal than it is to vertical. So if I click on it, it's going to pop it to horizontal. All right. If I hit it, that is a little bit unexpected. All right, let's see. Horizontal, vertical, come in here. There it is. And boom, it made it horizontal. Now this one is going to do what? Horizontal? No, vertical, because it was closer to vertical. All right, and so let's come in, let's kind of play with this a little bit. So I'm going to come back, I'm going to select all this, and then I am going to, I'm just going to draw 4 random lines. So I'm going to say this is one, escape, and then I'm going to get line, click, release, draw, click, release, escape. Okay, and then I will get a third one, click, escape. And then I will get a fourth one. Okay, click escape. Now I've got 4 lines. They are not associated with each other at all. How would I make that a rectangle? Well, I could come into my constraints, and what I could say is, wow, well, what if I made this vertical and this vertical? Okay, and then what if I made this horizontal and I made this horizontal. Now, that is not a rectangle for what? For two reasons, or more than two reasons. One is I've got opposite sides are parallel. That's good. Opposite sides are parallel, and that's very good. But what? They don't join at the corners, and the links don't match. Now, if I tell it to join at the corners, then it'll make the links work in order to meet the constraints. So you see, I don't need to put a dimension here and a dimension here to match, because it's going to respect those constraints, and it's going to make these whatever dimension they need to be so that everything matches. So that's going to be, if I want this point over this point, what type of constraint is that? That is the coincident restraint. You can get it here, or you can come down and say coincident. Now, what do I want? I want that point to be coincident with that point. Boom. Now what? I want this point coincident with this point. Boom. This point coincident with that point. Now look, I have a problem. The dimension isn't right, but it'll fix it, because it'll do whatever it has to what? Respect the constraints. It respects the constraints above everything else. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to say make it coincident with that, and boom, now I have a square or a rectangle. Now I could make it lock down to the origin if I put another coincident restraint, and this was the one that caused us problems earlier, but I say put that point right at the origin, and boom. Now, am I fully locked down? No. I've got all the lines tied together, but I never put what on them. I never put dimensions. And so let's come here, and let's say that's 100, enter. And then let's come here, and let's say that is 75, enter. And boom, sketch is fully locked down. It knows exactly what size. It knows exactly what position. Everyone is happy. And we understand how we got there. We understood how we took 4 random lines and made a rectangle by being deliberate with our constraints. Now, there's no advantage to that. It's just as easy to just go in and draw the rectangle and let Fusion 360 put the constraints on, but now you understand better about the constraints. One other constraint I should show you. Okay, let's say that we have done horizontal and vertical. I've explained that if it's closer to horizontal, the line will pop to horizontal, or if it's close to vertical, it will pop to vertical. If it's closer to horizontal, it'll pop to horizontal. But let me show you a couple of other things you can do with coincident. I'm going to make just another line here like that. All right, and now what I can also do is I can make coincident this point. Did I select it? Yeah. But instead of with a point, I can make a point coincident with a line. And when I do that, this line is going to be lined up. This point is going to be lined up with this line. Now, what I can do is I can come in and I can move this all around, but this end stays tied to this line. Now, what I can do is I can move where it is tied in. Okay, I can move where it is tied in, but that end always stays pinned to this line or an extension of that line. Okay, and so that just sort of shows you that you can constrain a point to a point, or you can constrain a line to a line. And so that is pretty good. Like, I'll show you another one. Let's just say I get a circle and I draw it, and then I can come in and I can get my constraint, and I can say constrain this circle to this corner, and there, hey, I've got kind of a pretty cool shape there that you might be able to do something with. Now, why is my sketch not fully constrained? I did not dimension the circle. So I would need to come in, select this, come over, and then let's say 25. Okay. And then boom, fully constrained. We have no ambiguity about anything related to dimension or position. We are fully constrained. Okay, let's erase this, and I will show you some other ones. So I think that we understand the Horizontal and vertical constraint, I think we understand the coincident restraint. Now let's talk about tangent. Okay, let's talk about tangent. And so I come here, I draw a circle, and then what I do is I draw a line. All right, and now what I want is to hit escape, and then I come in. This is the tangent. You can get it here, or you can come down here. And what I can say is that I want to get the tangent, and I want this line tangent to this circle. Now you can see that it's not on it, but it is the extension of it. So if I get this endpoint and come up, no matter where I move it, you see the circle is tangent to this line. Okay, and because I don't have any other constraints, I could move the circle as well, or I could move the endpoints of the line, but this circle stays tangent to this line. Now, why would we want to maybe do something like that? Let me make a little bit of a design, and I'm actually going to try to put some constraints, or put, fully define it. So I'm going to have a circle. It's going to be 50. All right. And click. I'm fully locked down because that, as we now know, is locked to the origin, is constrained to the origin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a construction line. I am going to come down here and say make it a construction line, and then I am going to click at the origin. I am going to come out, let's say 100, and then enter, and then boom, I am fully constrained because it knows exactly what to do with that line. Now I'm going to get a circle. I'm going to start at that point, and I'm going to come out to 125. Okay, enter, and darn it, it made it a construction circle. So I will select the circle, come over and tell it, no, don't do that. Okay, I have a big circle and a small circle, and I am fully constrained on my sketch. Guys, I like to, as I sketch in 2D, I like to try to keep my designs fully constrained as I go, because if you get a bunch of stuff going on, it's really hard at the end to come back and figure out why your design isn't constrained. So now I'm just going to kind of grab this, this line, and just without being particularly careful, I'm just going to say, okay, go from here to here, okay? And then I'm going to say go from here to here, just to kind of connect those things like that. Okay, now I'm going to come in and I am going to get my what? My tangent. And I'm going to now say make this line tangent to this circle, make this line tangent to this circle, and then this to this, and then this to this. And then when I do that, what? I am fully locked down, and I have a pretty slick little shape here. I can finish the sketch. I can leave the sketch level. I can come here and I can click here, hold shift down, click here, hold shift down, click here, and then I can say extrude. And then I like to, instead of doing it by eyeball, I like to do it by number. And so I put in 50, and then all of a sudden I have created kind of a pretty slick looking body here, right? Now, if you tried to draw this freehand, it's not going to be perfect. It's probably going to be pretty ugly. But do you see how gracefully the line comes into the circle? How gracefully that line comes into the circle? Why? Because we use the tangent constraint. You starting to see how the tangent is your friend, or not the tangent, but constraints in general are your friend, because it created a very smooth surface, a very smooth transition between the circle and the line that would have been very hard to do that perfectly just by freehanding it. So I'm going to undo that extrusion. I am going to right mouse click and I am going to edit sketch, and now I am back here, and now I am going to select all of this and I am going to delete. All right, let's see what else we can do here with constraints. We did horizontal, vertical, we did coincident, we did tangent. Equal, my friend, is not very interesting, but I'll show it to you. I'm going to make a random line, okay, and then escape. I'm going to make another random line, escape. Now on this random line, I am going to put a dimension, okay, and that dimension is 125, like that, Okay, and now I will come down here and I am going to get my equal. I'm going to get my equal constraint and I'm going to say make this equal to this. Now this is what I want you to see. Will it make the long one equal to the short one or the short one equal to the long one? It makes the short one equal to the long one. Why? Because the long one had a dimension, so it conforms to the dimensioned element. If you had two undimensioned lines, it would just be anybody's guess which one conformed to the other one. But then once you put a dimension on one, it puts a dimension on the other. And so what it means by equal, what does equal mean in Fusion 360 land? Equal simply means same length. And I wonder if you could do like two random rectangles and make them equal. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to do that and then escape. And then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do escape. And I don't think that it will make, the whole rectangles equal. Let's see if there's a way to that. No, it doesn't like that. So what I could do is I could say this side equal to this side, and then this side equal to that side. And then, you know, I've got them sort of just doing those two sides. I've got them the same size then. And so equal just changes the length of a line. That's all it does. So equal to me is not very useful. And to me, there's always more elegant ways to do something than make something equal length. But we're going to move on. We're going to move on. So I need to erase all this. And then we're going to come in, and what's the next constraint? Horizontal vertical tangent equal parallel. Okay, parallel is just pretty straightforward, that if I have this, okay, and then if I have this, and then if I get the parallel constraint, this will become parallel to that. You notice that parallel does not mean horizontal and it doesn't mean vertical. It just means the two of them are parallel. The two lines have the same slope if you are thinking in math terms. Okay, so that's pretty useful. Let's see. Perpendicular, very similar. I could have this line and then I could have this line. And then what I could do is I could come and I could say take this, and then I could say make it perpendicular to this. So this is perpendicular to this, and you can see that it just lines those two up. So that's pretty straightforward. So I did not need to do that. Let's come in and select. Let's select this and let's delete. And let's see what other constraints we have. We have perpendicular. Fix, unfix sort of locks everything about a particular sketch element to exactly what it is. And man, it just creates nightmares. So whatever you do, don't do fix, unfix. Always do it more properly using midpoints. Okay, do it more properly using, just using the more general constraints. Never go in and try to fix your problem by just doing fix or unfix. Okay, that is very poor form. Now I'm going to show you the midpoint constraint, and I think that is probably one of the most useful constraints. And so let's say that I am going to get a rectangle. The rectangle comes up here. Let's go ahead and let's dimension it. All right, let's go ahead and let's dimension it. So I'll get this, and let's say that right here we are at 100, enter, and then we are going to dimension this one at 75, enter, and that looks pretty good. Now we're going to come over and let's draw a circle. Let's go ahead and put a diameter on that circle with our dimension tool. We'll come over, let's say that is 50. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, how could I line this circle up with this here? Well, what I could do is with the top of that rectangle, I could come in and I could put it here and I could try to eyeball it. But man, you can't do things by eyeballing it. You need to use what? Constraints. Well, one thing maybe I could do is I could come in and I could use the midpoint constraint. The midpoint constraint. So I come up, and you notice that if I have the circle selected, it won't let me pick the midpoint. as a constraint, so you've got to make sure nothing is selected. And then what I'm going to select is I'm going to select midpoint, and then midpoint is going to come here, and I'm going to select the center of the circle, that point. And then if I come down to this line and I just click on this line, just by clicking on this line, what it is going to do is it's not going to put it where I clicked. It's going to put that center point where? In the center of this line here. And that is very, very useful. Okay, that is very, very useful. And let me kind of show you another one. Like I'm going to kind of start showing you things that matter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to select this. I'm going to delete all of that, and I'm going to show you now this concept. Like you've kind of learned the, let me go ahead. I'm going to show you the rest of these things. So concentric is kind of one that's sort of useful. If I have a circle, and then I have another circle, and then I come and I say I want them concentric, that is going to align the midpoints of the circle. So I have this and I align it to this. Let's try that again. I'm going to come here and I am going to, let me click off of everything, come up and get concentric and say that I want this circle, not the midpoint, the outer ring, and then line that up with the outer ring. What's annoying is some circle functions seem to want you to select the outer ring and some want you to select the midpoint, and I find that a little bit annoying. But now you see I've got those two circles concentric. I can grab them. Let's see, I can grab them and I can move them around. Why? Because I haven't put any dimensions or I haven't put anything deliberate on position. The only thing that it knows is those two center points have to be locked together. All right, let's get rid of that, and then let's come down and then let's look at collinear. Collinear is pretty straightforward. If I draw a line and then escape, and then I draw another line, and then escape, okay? And now if I say that I want them collinear, I want this collinear with that, what? It gives them the same slope, all right? It gives them the same slope. So now I can move them, okay, but they stay lined up. Now also I could take this point and I could move this point, but the two lines stay lined up, or I could move this point. So there's all types of different things that I can do, but no matter what I do, those two lines stay lined up, if that makes sense. All right, so we are getting through all of these constraints. Symmetry is kind of an important one, and so let me show you that one. I'm going to start by making a by making a construction line. So I will come here. This time I really do want a construction line. I'll come here, I'll come up, and then I will escape. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a dimension on it just so that I can get this thing locked down, and just say like 200 just so that it has a dimension, and we'll be happy. I'm going to get a circle, and let's see, I'm going to give it a place for that circle to be. And so I'm going to come over here, and let's say that I come over by 50, enter. And then what I'm going to do, I am going to go up by, let's say, I didn't mean to click enter, so I'll get the dimension tool and come in and say that is 75. So now I have a very specific place for my circle to be. Now I come in and I make this circle, and let's make that 25. Okay, and I did not want that to be a construction circle, so I will click on circle, I will click on construction line, and now it is a circle. And look, the whole thing is sketched down. Let me show you what this symmetry function does. I can now just draw a random circle over here like this, and I can say that I want symmetry. So first of all, what objects do I want symmetry? I want objects between symmetry between this object and this object. Now it is asking me for the line of symmetry. The line of symmetry is my construction line, and then boom. Do you see that it changed the dimension and the position of that second circle? Why? Because Fusion 360 respects constraints over dimensions. And also look, you see I am fully locked down. Now let's come over here and let's get our dimension tool, and then let's come over to this dimension and let's make this 100. What do you think is going to happen if I make that 100? It makes the other one 100 because that other one was told to just mirror whatever this one does. Now, what if we come in here, instead of 50, what if we make this 100? Okay, everything that we do on this side is reflected on that side because we are using the symmetry command, and that is actually a very, very powerful very powerful constraints. We're going to come in, we're going to, I do not like that. I like to select with a window. We're going to select all that. We're going to delete it. Okay, now there's one more constraint. This one would really take a full lesson, so I can only show you just a little bit. But let's say that we make a circle, okay, like that. And now we come over here and we make a bigger circle. And now instead of connecting those with a line, I'm going to connect them with a spline, which is like a curved line. And I'm just going to say go from here up to there. Okay, and then escape. I should have hit enter. So I'm going to get this. I'm going to go from here up to here. I'm going to click and then I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to get that spline tool again. I'm going to say go from here and go over to here, click, okay, and then I'm going to say enter. All right, so now that is not particularly beautiful, is it? But I can get my curvature tool and I can say smoothly connect this, make it a curve between there and there. And look at that and make it between here and here, to where if it had been the tangent tool, it would come straight off of that circle. But this curvature thing makes a beautiful curve, and I can do the same thing between here and here, and the same thing between here and here. And to fully constrain this thing is really kind of complicated because you not only have to constrain this point, you have to constrain these points, and it gets a little complicated. So I am not going to fully lock this thing down because this is a long lesson as it is, but I am going to finish the sketch. I'm going to come to the home view, and then we are going to get our select tool and say select this. I'm holding shift down this and holding shift down this, and then I am going to extrude, and let's extrude to 75 and then click enter. And wow, look at this beautiful, I'm going to get the orbit tool down here, left mouse click, okay, and then I can move that thing around. And do you see what an elegant, beautiful shape that you have created, that you would never be able to do that with freehand? And so hopefully this is showing you the power of the constraints. Hopefully you're starting to feel like the constraints are your friend. And so we are going to go back. I am going to right mouse click. I'm going to say edit sketch. Okay, we're back here. I'm going to do select. We are going to delete everything. And now I'm going to start showing you this concept. So you sort of, you know, mechanically you understand what each one of the constraints are. Now you've got to start thinking about how to use those to make designs that don't break, and designs that can be very complicated, and you can edit them without things getting messed up. And I'm going to kind of show you what I mean by that. And again, this is what you are going to learn. Never use a dimension when you instead could use a constraint. And then secondly, constraints are not about just locking down your model where you get this little lock. It's not just about do whatever you can to lock your model down. It is about forming right relationships between related items in your sketch. And so let me show you what I mean. So I want to design a little rectangle that has like a little cylindrical shape that you could set something down in it, like you'd put a bar between two brackets. And so let's do something really simple like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself some construction lines. And so I come here and I say construct. And then I'm going to start here, and I am going to come out, let's say I am going to come out 125, okay? And so I'll actually type in 125 there, okay? And then I am going to create again, starting where I left off, and then I am going to come up to, let's say, 150, okay, 150, like that. That is rather strange. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so let me move this out of the way. Let me move this out of the way. So 125 over and 150, I have a spot for drawing my circle. So now I'm going to get a circle and I'm going to draw it, and I'm going to make that 75. Okay, and enter. And of course I didn't want that, so I select and come over here, turn the construction line off. And so now I've got a circle where I want it. Now I'm going to draw a rectangle over here, and let's make that rectangle, let's see, I can get my dimension tool, I can come here, I can make the rectangle. What do I want? Let's say that I'm going to make it 150 tall. Okay, and then let's say I'm going to make it 250 across, 250 across, like that. Now I'm going to take this, and I am going to put a coincident constraint between this point and this point. All right, boom. What do I have? I have a sketch that is fully constrained. That's good, right? So I'm going to say finish sketch. And then I am going to come and I'm going to get my extrude tool, and I want to extrude this. And then how far do I want to extrude it? Let's extrude it 50, and then enter. And then boom, look at that. I have this beautiful three-dimensional object, and we could go in and we could print that. Okay, but then after printing it, I think, you know, that is really too tall for a bracket. I need it to be smaller, you know, not as tall. I need it to be more narrow. So I'm going to come down and I am going to right mouse click, edit my sketch. And then what I'm going to do is instead of 150, that really needed to be more like 75. Okay, and now I'm going to edit that, and then I'm going to finish sketch. And now what do I have? I have a broken design. All right, what disappeared? That slot disappeared. Why did I break my model? Now just imagine as this got more and more complicated and you put more and more things together, just imagine how utterly, completely, hopelessly broken this thing is going to be. Why? Because I used dimensions when I should have used what? I should have used constraints. All right, so let's look at a better way to do that. So I'm going to undo, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I am going to show you a better way to do this. And I think it would be better to just start over rather than trying to undo things. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to make a rectangle. I will make a rectangle, and I will start at the origin, and I will come up and I am going to dimension that with the little dimension tool. Let's dimension it at, let's say 200, enter, and then let's dimension this at, let's say 150, enter, okay, and now that is fully locked down. I'm going to draw a circle, and now this circle, I will dimension my circle at, let's say 25, enter. That's not very good. I'm going to dimension it at 50, enter. All right. Now, how could I do this in a better way? I could use constraints rather than pulling this over here and just leaving it floating, trying to eyeball it. And rather than giving myself a construction point to move it to, what I have to see is in Fusion 360, the secret to success, I want to say it very carefully, is right relationships. Use constraints to create right relationships between related parts. This is going to be the slot. This is going to be the bracket. They are related. How are they related? Well, one thing is I want the middle of the slot on this line, Okay, I always want the middle of the slot on the line no matter whether it moves up and down. How could I do that? I could do that with a constraint. And what I could say is that I want coincident. I want this point. I think I can do this. I want this point coincident with this. That is probably not going to work. Let me try again. I sometimes have trouble with circles, but I will promise you that I'm going to make this point. So I'm going to get coincident. And what I want is I want that coincident with that. And boom. So what is the right relationship? You always want this circle, the center of the circle, right on the edge. And now watch this. Okay, now watch this. As I come in and I say 250, okay, the circle continued to move up and it stayed at the right position up and down. Okay, now what is the problem? Should this just be in any old place? No, it needs to be in the middle. Okay, it needs to be in the middle. So we sort of eyeball it in, right? No, this is not Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint. We've got to be deliberate. So what can we do? We could come in and we could say, I want a constraint of midpoint. Okay, I want a midpoint constraint. Let me click off of everything. And I want a midpoint constraint between there, that's that center point of the circle, and this line. And then boom, it is constrained in the middle. Now, what I want to show you is we really made this a lot harder than it needed to be, because what we should have done to begin with is, like you see, that was a perfectly acceptable solution. It was perfectly constrained. It would have worked perfectly, but as we get better, we could see that there's a better way to do it, and that is the midpoint. What I want is the midpoint of this directly to the midpoint of this, and I don't need that intermediate step because this will get it, you know, in the middle this way, and it'll get it in the middle this way. And so I go boom, and now it is ready. Now, if I come up and I say I'm fully locked down, I say finish sketch, and then I come in here and let's see. I don't know if I can actually get rid of that. Okay, let me go back to my sketch now. Turn the sketch on. And now I'm going to extrude, and so I'll pick this, and then I am going to extrude out 75, okay, and then let's take a look. Okay, there it is. And so now as we look around, we see that we've got this very nice shape. But now if we come back to the sketch, and if we edit the sketch, and I say edit sketch, and I come in, and now what I am going to do is I'm going to say, well, really, you know, on that, what I really want there is 100, okay, and then what I really want here is 125, okay, and then what I really want, where was that dimension here? It's off the screen, okay. What I really want here is, let's say 110, like that, and I change all of those things, and then I finish sketch and come back over here. Look at that. Boom. Okay. You see, my design did not break. I can turn the sketch off where I just see the body by clicking that little eye, and boom, you see my sketch, my model did not break, and I can go in and I can edit it. Why? Because I fully constrained my sketch, and I used constraints instead of dimensions. And by properly using constraints, to properly define the relationship between related parts, allows me to get something that behaves like this. And this is how the pros design. They design such that you can go in and change dimensions and change parameters without your model breaking. And guys that are just, hacks go in and start drawing, and then they get more and more and more complicated, and then you want to change one dimension and the whole thing breaks. And I used to have some mechanical designers that designed like that before they got fired. And what would happen is then they would be extremely resistant to any change, because any change could just completely wipe out their model, to where the really great mechanical designers would never mind you changing things because they had designed things not to break, if that makes sense. But I kind of digressed a little bit there. Let's go back. Let's see if we can get back to our sketch level. And let's come in, let's select all this, let's delete it. Let's see if you can think. I'm going to give you a couple of things to think about and see if you can tell me what the solution is. What if I have a rectangle, okay, and let's go ahead and dimension it. So I'll get the dimension tool, and I'll come down here, and let's say that's 150, enter, and then we come here, and let's say this is 75, enter. And then let's say that I have another one, and this one is going to be 25, okay, and then tab 25 like that. Okay, not fully constrained because this one up here is just floating around, right? But now what I want, even though this is square and this is rectangular, I want this to be placed in the middle of this, okay? Now you could do it with dimensions, but you're going to have to do a lot of calculations, and you're going to have to create a center point, and then anything you change, that's no longer in the center. So somebody tell me how I could get this in the middle of this. And you see this rectangle doesn't have a center point, so it's kind of tricky, right? And so I could do it with a bunch of construction lines and dimensions, but somebody tell me an easier way. Somebody tell me an easier way. Okay, this is where you start thinking like a designer, and you start thinking, okay, what do I want? I want the right relationship with this to this, and I use constraints to get that right relationship. So watch this. Okay, I'm going to select the line tool. I'm going to say construction line. I'm going to say go from this corner to this corner with a construction line. Then what I'm going to say is go from this corner to this corner with a construction line. Then I'm going to get the midpoint constraint, and I'm going to say I want the midpoint of that diagonal to line up with the midpoint of that diagonal, and shazam, look at that. Okay, do you see what it means now to think as constraints your friend? Do you realize how hard that would have been with normal construction lines and just using dimensions, and how that thing would utterly, completely break? But now let's look at it. Okay, I can come in, instead of 25, what if I say 35? Okay, and that still worked. What if I come here, and then on this one, instead of 25, what if I say 15? Okay, and then on this one, what if I say 125? You see, no matter what I do with it, it doesn't break. I'm fully locked down. I could say finish sketch. I could come over here like this, and I still have that mess from earlier. You see, I really should have deleted all that, but that is that old body. You see, I deleted the sketch, but I didn't delete the body. And this is what you call one big goat rodeo here. So let's see. I think maybe I can delete the extrude down here. Okay, yeah, I can delete the extrude. Now I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. And I can say bring that up 50. Okay, and now I have a body that is going to behave itself very well, and this slot is always going to be in the middle of that body. So that is just really, really, really super cool. This time I'm going to undo the extrude so I don't end up in that mess that I had earlier. I'm going to edit the sketch, and so I'm going to say edit sketch. I think there's a little trick I'm going to show you that sometimes circles and squares working together is a little hard. So I'm going to get my rectangle here, and then I'm going to do D for dimension. If I just click D, I don't have to come up here and get the dimension tool. And so we're going to say 125, enter, and then we are going to say, what would this be? 150 and enter. Okay, got a nice little rectangle, and now I have a circle, and then I go like this, and I have a circle, and let me dimension that, and we'll dimension that to 100, let's say. Okay, now how would I get this to sit right on the edge of this? Okay, how would I get this circle to sit right on the edge of that? Well, you know that if I did tangent, I could get this to touch this, but I also want it in the middle. Okay, I want it in the middle. And so that gets a little bit more tricky. I could get it here, but then how do I get it up and down right? And you're kind of going to be tempted. You're kind of going to be tempted to use a dimension. But if you do that, if I change the size of the square, then it's going to break my design. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of trick here. I want to do an alignment, a vertical horizontal alignment. But I want to do it between this point, okay, I get this point, all right, and then I come over here. Now, the trick is if I want to align points, if I want to align a group of points horizontally, I've selected the first point. When I select the second point, I have to click Shift, okay, and when I click Shift, you see like it could go there or it could go there. It sees that. Like, in fact, I could just go like that and you see it aligned this to that. But that is not what I want. Let me undo that. Okay. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this up here a little closer to what I really want. I put it like this. Okay. Now watch this. What I can do is I can get my constraint, my horizontal vertical, click off of it, horizontal vertical, and I want this point horizontally aligned to another point. Because I want another point, I have to hold Shift down, right? I've got Shift down, and I want that what in the middle. Okay, so you see when I go up and down, when I get to the middle, it gives me that little triangle. I am at the middle, so now I click and boom. This is lined up now horizontally in the middle with this, with a constraint. But what else do I need? I also need it tangent. Okay, so now I click that, I make it tangent here, and now I've got that pin sitting on top of that body. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, I might want to make a shape kind of like this. So I got the line, I'm going to go from there to there, and then I'm going to go from there to there. And then who is your friend? The tangent tool is your friend. So I'm going to say make that tangent to that, and make that tangent to that. And then I have just a really slick little body here. And then what I can do is I can come and I can get my extrude tool, say I want that, 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 and that. And then what I can do is let's extrude out 50. Okay. And now we have a really, really nice body. And let me rotate this around. Okay. Do you see that nice body that we have? Okay, I can also turn off the sketch now so that you can just see the body. Now imagine if I had given you an assignment to make some of these to begin with, you would have just been going crazy. But if we start with constraints and we design at the two-dimensional level based on mastering these constraints, all of a sudden Fusion 360 starts doing some pretty nice stuff. Now, this sure enough is a pretty simple shape, but if you had tried to do this just by freehand drawing or something like that, it would have been a mess and it would have been no fun at all. Okay, guys, let's see if there's any other ones that we can do. Let's do a quick design. Okay, I'm just going to do one more quick design. So I'm going to undo that extrude. Okay, I'm going to undo that extrude. I'm going to edit my sketch. Okay, I'm going to select this and then I'm going to delete it. All right, I'm going to make a circle. Okay, I'm going to make a circle and now I'm going to dimension that circle. Okay, and that's going to be 200 in radius, in diameter, I mean. And then I'm going to give myself a construction line. I'm going to come out here. That is 200, and then half of 200 is 100, half of 100 is 50. So I'm going to come out 50 like that. And that was supposed to be a construction line, so we will make that a construction line. I will get this out of the way, and now I will make another circle here, and this circle will be, let's say, 25, like that. Okay, look at that. You see, as I'm using constraints and as I'm using construction lines, I am keeping this thing locked down, fully constrained. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to create a circular pattern. I'm going to take this, and then I am going to make a circular pattern. Where is that? There it is. Okay. And I'm going to select one object, this one, and then I'm going to select a center point, which is this one, and I'm going to go all the way around, and what I want is I want 8 of those things, and then I click OK, and boom, look at that, fully constrained. Now I can say Finish Sketch. I can come up to the 45-degree view. I can select this, and those should not have been construction lines. So let me go back. Construction line circles. But I can fix that. I can say select this, and then I'm holding Shift down this. That's no good. It's kind of painful when you make a mistake like that, isn't it? Select them all and then turn that off. Okay, now I have real circles, and then I am still locked down. I say Finish Sketch. I come to the home view, and then I select this. I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to extrude by 75, enter. And wow, look at this design. Do you see how quick now? Do you see how now we're starting to design quick like the pros do that we see the videos of? But we have gotten there slowly where you now understand what I'm doing, and you understand how things fit together, and you understand how you could go in and you could do something like this. And man, when I used to teach people in person, nothing would be more painful than just watching a student try to come in and freehand draw these circles in, or draw the circles and put them in with dimensions. But you see, we're using constraints and we're getting really, really nice bodies that behave well. And then as we begin to come in and do more and more and more, our models hold together and our models don't break. And then we start having a whole lot of fun. I think, guys, that is really what I needed to cover today. This has been a pretty long lesson, but this lesson and last week's lesson, lesson number 5 and lesson number 6, were the most important lessons. And with what I've shown you already, you should be ready to go out and do some pretty neat things in Fusion 360. What did we learn last week? You've got to be mindful of the palette. If you want to select something, go up and click on Select. If you want to draw something, go in and click on what you want to draw. If you want to resize something, you say Resize. You can't just go in and point clickety, clickety, clickety. You have to be deliberate with the palette in Fusion 360. The second thing that you have to do is you have to be deliberate about dimension and position. Everything you do, you have to specify a dimension and a position. Then last week, we also learned that you need to fully constrain your designs before you leave the sketch level. Then what we learned today was that never use a dimension when you can use a constraint. And you have to think about constraints as rightly defining the relationship between related parts of your sketch. Like this hole always needs to be in the middle, or this hole always needs to be tangent, or the center of the hole always needs to be on the corner of the corner of the rectangle. You see, think about the relationship and then realize that relationship using constraints, and then only use an absolute minimum of dimensions that overall kind of size the box, okay, or overall size your model or design. Does this make sense? Guys, leave me a comment down below. Does this clear the fog for you guys, or did I just make the fog get thicker? Did it go from a foggy day to a foggy night, or was it a foggy day and all of a sudden the sun is starting to come out? Guys, I hope you are enjoying these lessons, taking them as much as I am making them. Remind you guys to be sure and order your calipers. In the next couple of weeks, we are going to be using those calipers. We're going to pretty soon get back and we'll probably have one more lesson on sketching. We'll probably have one more lesson on sketching, and then the following lesson after that, which would be lesson 8, we're actually going to go in and start doing the three-dimensional design and then start printing on the 3D printer again. I can show you that I am keeping my work area neat here. Oops, that camera froze, so I guess I can't show you that. What happened? What happened there? I was going to show you my studio view, but it looks like my camera froze up there. So we'll just come back to RiverCam. But what we'll be doing is we will be going to the I'm very confused by my camera views here, but we will be going to the 3D sketches and then printing pretty soon. But we've done some stuff to get the printer set up. We've done some stuff to tweak the printer and get it ready to go. And so in another couple of lessons, we're going to go back and start designing in 3D and start printing our designs again. But this time we're going to be designing like a pro. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, helps us with the old YouTube juice. And then also subscribe if you have not subscribed already, and leave a comment, because when you leave a comment and give a thumbs up, YouTube will offer this video to more people. And that's important because the world needs more people doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.